There being 8 ayes, 0 nays, the motion prevails. All right, members, that concludes today's pending business. With that, we will move to new business. The chair lays out House Bill 1453 and recognizes Representative Tepper to explain the bill. The chair offers a committee substitute. Members, are there any, Chair offers a committee substitute. Representative Tepper, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to lay out committee substitute House Bill 1453. The committee substitute is substantial change. A certificate of obligation, or a CO, is a type of debt security issued by cities, counties, and hospital districts. Although COs are oftentimes used to finance public infrastructure projects, local governments have used COs to finance a variety of capital improvement projects and services. Local governments often use COs in emergency situations when they need to finance a project quickly and do not have time to seek voter approval, or when obtaining voter approval is difficult to accomplish. Unlike general obligation bonds, which require voter approval through an election, local governments may issue COs without seeking voter approval. Subsequently, local governments are increasingly bypassing voters and issuing COs for projects historically financed through the general obligation bonds. According to the Texas Bond Review Board, CO debt outstanding among local governments increased by 93.3% from fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2024. In FY 2015, CO debt outstanding was $13.66 billion. In 2024, CO debt outstanding was $26.41 billion. This is nearly a $13 billion increase. Here are just a couple examples of CO issuances that I believe either go against the will of the voters or should have gone before the voters. Famous Ector County. Ector County in 2024, Ector County authorized approximately $317.5 million in COs for a new county courthouse. In 2013, Ector County voters rejected a $95 million bond proposition for the facility. In 2018, the Ector County Commissioners Court rejected an $85 million proposal for the facility. In other words, they've gone on with the project, although the bonds or the elections have gone against the county twice now, and they proceeded with the project. El Paso Hospital District. In 2022, the El Paso Hospital District sought to issue $400 million in COs for various projects, including expanding the emergency room, cancer center, children's inpatient surgery, and emergency department, burn operating rooms, and ambulatory emergency services, as well as a neighborhood health center in central El Paso. El Paso Hospital District owns the University Medical Center there. They're all appropriate projects. Later that year, the Libre Initiative submitted a petition with enough signatures from voters to stop the CO issuance. This prevented the El Paso Commissioners Court from being allowed to authorize the COs. So to simplify it, it's a great group of things to be done, but instead of taking it to the voters, they were going to push through the COs where they probably could have convinced the voters to pass those bonds. Travis County in 2016, Travis County voters rejected a $287 million bond for a new civil courthouse in downtown Austin. In 2019, Travis County issued approximately $273 million in COs for the facility anyway. City of Denton. In 2024, the City of Denton issued almost $243 million in COs for water infrastructure, very worthy, light and power systems, the municipal service center building, equipment and vehicles for many city departments, including fire and police, HVAC systems, parking facilities, technology, equipment, software, IT, streets, drainage, and sewer systems, and more. It's sort of an omnibus CO issuing when there probably should have been an election. House Bill 1453 ensures a local government only issues the CO required for critical projects and immediate needs when it does not have enough time to seek voter approval for issuing debt. The bill also aims to increase voter input into the issuance of the debt. Compared to current law, The substitute does the following, and we worked very well with our stakeholders on this, which is why the committee substitute is so substantially different than the original filed bill. The substitute removes the ability of hospital districts to issue COs while still allowing them to issue tax anticipation notes or TANs. We did this with everyone. The TANs were in the original bills, the tax anticipation notes. They have a 7-year maturity. A lot of the cities use them to turn over their fleet, the fire trucks, police vehicles, and that sort of thing. And it really helps them have a much more efficient means of replacing those assets. The substitute allows local governments to issue COs only for the following public works. Representative Baumgartner. Landfills, utility systems, water supply projects, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, water or wastewater conveyance facilities, flood control and drainage projects, police stations, fire stations, first responder training facilities, jails, and juvenile detention facilities. The substitute reduces the maximum maturity period for a CO from 40 years to 30 years. Might as well keep it within a generation. The substitute reduces the threshold for voters to protest the issuance of COs from 5% to 2% of the registered voters of the local government. It is important to note that voters cannot protest the issuance of COs through a petition when an issuer authorizes COs in certain cases, such as when a CO issuance is necessary to preserve or protect the public health of residents or in case of unforeseen damage to public property. My substitute does not change this. You will likely hear testimony from various groups or people representing local governments who will oppose this bill. I would like to make it clear that nearly all, but not all individuals who contacted my office with concerns about this bill, including some who will likely testify today, did not do so until after the bill was posted for a public hearing. I am happy to receive input from interested stakeholders on this bill, but I filed it in November. My office has remained available to receive stakeholder feedback, but approaching my office just days or minutes before the hearing and subsequently opposing legislation makes productive collaboration difficult. I've noticed that trend around the Capitol where they attack it right before it's going to be laid out and then tell people that you didn't help them or work with them on it. Members, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members, other questions for Representative Tepper? Representative Bryant?
Representative Tepper, I'm trying to juggle the bill versus the substitute. Can you, if your bill, let's just assume your bill passes, what will no longer be possible that is possible now? With
Roads.
I'm talking about the substitute.
Roads, airports, shoot, I had that list. Roads, airports, other infrastructure, city halls, county courthouses, historical improvements. By the way, you can improve or you can renovate your courthouse. You just have to get a vote for it. We're not banning anyone from doing any of these things. You just have to go to the voters.
Now, what are the ramifications let's just take your first example, Ector County, when you move from 5% to 2%? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised you didn't know the answer to this. I wouldn't either, but I'm wondering what 2% is in a county of that size. Is that
Shoot, Representative,
I mean,
I'm not
we don't want a
advised.
situation where there's a group of people that are going to always oppose everything, and you can always get them to sign and they lock up the local government.
Not always. I mean, I've done referendum. It's very difficult to get the signatures and make sure that, first of all, you're getting a voter within that district. You have to check every night those voters. If you want to do it correctly, you better get about 25 to 50% over what you were expected to get to be able to proceed through the city secretary. So I think 2% will be a much more reasonable. So if you have 100,000 voters, 2,000 would be right there, difficult to get, but much more obtainable than the 5%.
2,000 no votes, not too hard to get in most places. There's always people available for that.
We thought that 5% was overwhelming, but We picked 2.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, members? I've just got one, and that is the anticipation notes. The substitute does allow anticipation notes that are typically more shorter term amortization schedules, and typically, I think you said fleets of vehicles, police department, fire trucks, that type of thing. What's the average term on a CO?
7 years.
7 years on a
7-year notes, and the cities have gotten very scientific and mathematical with how they turn over their fleets to be most efficient. I know one city, I'll say it, Wolford, Texas, maintains 80% of the value of those vehicles. They know exactly when to turn them over and trade them in for the new vehicle, and it's all done with TANs, tax anticipation notes.
And then the typical amortization on a CO is what, 20, 25, 30 years?
About 30 to 40 years. Now, we've seen them shorter. I understand that they can be shorter. They can be 5 years or longer. It's not as intensive a process to get the note. But I typically see them, and I might be wrong. I didn't look to see what the average life of those notes are, but I've seen them usually at 30 years. There are some 40-year notes, and we're cutting that out in the bill.
So if a community was experiencing pretty rapid growth and they needed to build a new fire station, that would still be allowable under your substitute?
That's allowed in a CO without a vote. Okay. And that was a negotiation, Chairman. Personally, they should probably vote for those too. But we went ahead and conceded the fire stations, police training facilities, that sort of thing.
Okay. Other members? Representative School.
Representative Tepper, I don't mind showing my ignorance. I'm new on this. Can you explain the difference between the different types of bonds? There's COs, general obligation, and anticipation notes?
General obligation are voted for by the taxpayers. They effectively have most of the same aspects of a CO. But the CO, the city council can issue, or county commissioner's court. I'm sure there's more details about them that I'm not aware of. But the GOs are known as voter approved, the COs are city council approved, and the tax anticipation notes are city council approved, with the city manager, and they're used for a much shorter debt life cycle.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So the COs, the intent has been, or the legislative intent has been, they're emergency items, that there's just not enough time to get voter approval?
Usually an infrastructure issue. The water systems, Representative Baumgartner had discussed with me some water issues, which is a big issue right now around the state of Texas. Water treatment, piping, you name it. So we went ahead and excluded those from having to be GOs to COs.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to testimony.
Reserve my right to close.
The chair calls Enrique Romero. Mr. Romero, we show you registered as Enrique Romero on behalf of yourself and the Libra Institute. Yes, and you are testifying for the bill, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed.
Yes. Well, good morning, esteemed chairman and honorable members of this committee. My name is Enrique Romero, and I'm here representing the Libre Initiative and myself as a private citizen. Today, I speak in strong support of HB1453, a vital piece of legislation that will empower our community by ensuring that debt accumulation is conducted responsibly and transparently, with the voices of taxpayers at the forefront. For too long, local governments in El Paso have relied on certificates of obligation to incur significant public debt without direct voter approval. While there are circumstances where debt is necessary, it is crucial that taxpayers have a say in how their hard-earned money is spent. The financial burden placed on the community through non-voter approved debt should not be taken lightly. This bill closes the loophole that allows local officials to bypass the will of the people, and it puts the power back into the hands of the community. As of right now, El Paso has the highest amount of certificate of obligation debt in the state. of Texas. Certificates of obligation debt in El Paso has been on the rise since 2012, showcasing the constant abuse of certificates of obligation in my community. In recent years, El Paso has constantly ranks in the top 10 cities with the highest property taxes across the nation. El Paso has become an overtaxed and underpaid community, unfortunately. Imagine the families in El Paso, a working class community, working tirelessly to make ends meet, burdened by further financial burden through these certificates of obligation. This is not just a fiscal issue, it's a matter of fairness and transparency. Our community deserves a voice in decisions that directly impact their lives and overall prosperity. HB 1453 ensures that taxpayers are not just silent observers, but active participants in shaping their financial future. We have witnessed the adverse effects of unchecked debt, families struggling under the weight of increased taxes and government spending that does not reflect our community. As mentioned before, in 2022, the county government and the hospital district tried to pass $400 million worth of certificates of obligation without voter approval. The Libre Initiative had to get involved by collecting 35,000 signatures to stop that certificate of obligation, to bypass the will of the voters, and force it into a vote, which was defeated by the people of El Paso. The idea of opportunity and prosperity in my community are currently not reflected when a family has to or must work 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet and pay their property taxes. This bill promotes accountability, preventing local governments from abusing certificates of obligation when the voters have already expressed their wishes. Time and time again have we seen the local governments in El Paso forego the wishes of the electorate to have their pet projects funded through certificates of obligation. By passing HB 1453, you will protect the hardworking taxpayers of El Paso and Texas, ensuring financial responsibility and reinforcing the principles of good governance. This is why the Libre Initiative, an organization that exists to empower the Latino community, supports this bill, and we respectfully urge you to support this piece of legislation and stand with the hardworking taxpayers of El Paso and Texas. Your support for this legislation is a commitment to fairness, transparency, community empowerment, prosperity, and opportunity. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, you want to, are there any questions? Yeah. There may be a question or two, and we just want to thank you for coming such a long distance to testify today. Members, are there questions? Representative Bumgarner.
I just got one question. You might not know the answer to this. What's the current tax rate in El Paso?
The current tax rate in El Paso, unfortunately, I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you that the debt for certificate of obligation right now passes the $1 billion, barely passes $1 billion.
How many people live in El Paso?
Of around 850,000.
Thank you.
Members, other questions? Again, thank you very much for testifying.
Thank you for your time.
Chair now calls Michael Bartolotta. We show you registered as Michael Bartolotta on behalf of HilltopSecurities.com, and you are testifying against the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Lambert, Vice Chairman Pliza, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on House Bill 1453. When we look at public finance, our Hilltop Securities, through our predecessor firm, has been representing firms since issuers in Texas since 1946. When we look at the last several years of construction within Texas, we've seen construction projects increase from 15 to 30% with inflation, and there's some statistics to support that. State and local government represents about half of the non-residential construction within Texas. House Bill 1453, in our opinion, curbs financial flexibility for issuers to manage their jurisdictions. how to manage growth, how to manage construction risk in projects. Funding contracts within 180 days of passing of authorization could force a procurement problem. And how do you let contracts? How do you do the analysis of contracts to make sure that they're good contracts, good construction with cost containment? Shortening certificates of obligations life from 40 to 30 years. Federal tax law already allows a useful life calculation. Certificates of obligation should be matched with the useful life of the project, the consumption of that project over the life of its issuance. Federal tax law limits to 120% of the useful life of a project of issuance.
Let me interrupt you just a moment. The chair
Yes.
recognizes Representative Vo as being present. Please proceed.
Current law allows voters to petition with 5% of registered voters, as was discussed earlier by Representative Tepper and a current individual, previous individual. When we look at certificates of obligation, they are a tool that is commonly used by state and local governments to access Texas Water Development Board and other programs. They use it as credit enhancement. 33% of the certificates of obligation, according to data from the Texas Municipal Advisory Council, is self-supporting certificates of obligation. That means they were a revenue bond, a water and sewer that relies solely on revenue bonds, revenue for use of the asset, whether it's water or sewage. They pay for that right to use it. Certificates of obligation allows the local government to enhance its credit with its COs, even though it's self-supporting debt. That allows it to go to the water board and get a lower interest rate, have less reserves. Rating agencies look at the same factors. When you look at credit issuance, you're trying to achieve the lowest interest cost for a project once a governmental entity decides to go forward with a project. So how do you achieve that? So they use their credit in many circumstances to do that. And so they use the COs to credit enhance, even though it's going to be paid for by the revenue of a system. Another 14% of COs, according to Texas Municipal Advisory Council, is mostly self-supporting, not 100% self-supporting. So again, they're using the revenues of a system to pay for the debt outstanding. It may not have enough of the COs. So instead of burdening the taxpayers with a general obligation tax or ad valorem tax, they're using revenues of a system to help support it. So for those reasons, we like to oppose the bill as it's currently written. We look forward to reading the substitute bill. I'm not a lawyer, but we'd be happy to work with Representative Tepper in analyzing the bill and making sure it's good for governmental entities that we represent throughout Texas. That's my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, questions for this witness? Representative Bryant?
Could you tell us how Texas compares to the rest of the country with regard to the use of the COs or whatever they call them in other states?
Right. Most states probably are not as prolific, is my gut assumption. I don't do a lot of business outside of the state of Texas, but in other states, we see other financing techniques, limited obligation techniques, limited ad valorem tax bonds. We don't see as many certificates, but we see other forms of not general obligation debt, non-voted debt, whether it be a lease purchase, it be a limited tax obligation, stuff of that nature. But I would say that certificates of obligation is used throughout the country, but Texas is.
Well, Mr. Tepper pointed out that the total indebtedness for these COs looks like it's increased by 100%. If I did the math right, in just a few years here.
Right.
From 9 years, increased by 100% from 13 billion to 26 billion. Our population has definitely been increasing,
That's
but
right.
not by that much.
No, I would agree with that. But what I would take a look at is, let's take a look at what the real math is. How much of that increase from $13 billion to $26 billion was self-supporting debt? How much of it was limited obligation, where some of it was paid by self-supporting revenues and general obligations? and then take a look at that. That would be one of the points I would like to take a look at.
Well, it seems to me the danger here is that you get an unsophisticated group of people elected locally, which happens from time to time, and they're railroaded by the big, opinion leaders in town into doing things that benefit the opinion leaders but not the public. Well, do you see any need for limitations in this area?
I think there's some opportunity for limitations when voters have expressed an interest not to do something repeatedly. I think that's a limitation that's worth exploring, absolutely.
You talked about how they save money. They get a lower interest rate by being able to utilize these. Would you explain that again?
Certainly. Let's use a hypothetical straw person example. If you had interest rates of a A-rated community, and if its rating is A by rating agencies, if it does certificates of obligation, normally the rating is lower than that A rating of a general obligation of that municipality. So if you go to issue, say, revenue bonds or water bonds to, say, the Texas Water Development Board's loan program, and you do it non-voted, it would be the lower rating. So governmentally would then say, let me get the higher rating by using my certificates of obligation, even though I don't plan on levying the tax or using general fund monies. Let me use that, my credit, the credit of that agency, that governmental entity, to lower its cost, to achieve a lower interest rate.
Well, is that entity's, doesn't its liabilities increase?
Yes, it would have liabilities. It would have two liabilities. It would have a liability if it's directly supported on a revenue system, and it would have a liability also as a certificates of participation. And what you would do to a rating agency and say, offset by the revenue that's coming in through the revenue system. So you would take a look at your net debt, net self-supporting debt.
Thank you.
Representative Baumgartner.
So just to piggyback off that, and I've never heard anybody say, no, we can't support this, and help me understand that. What would be the threshold where they wouldn't support it? Because I got the numbers for El Paso. Their tax rate's 0.761405 out of 100, whereas the municipality I live in, Flower Mound, their tax rate is 0.387 out of 100, and they have around $120 million in debt, and they have a AAA bond rating, and they don't really use COs that much. But over here in El Paso, they seem to be using a lot of COs. At what point is your tax rate going to flip, and it's going to pretty much sink the municipality?
I would take a look at the components of the tax rate. How much is being used for current services versus debt service? I would take a look at that. I don't have the exact facts of El Paso, but I would take a look at how much is debt related and how much is services, as we've seen in.
Well, we all know that it's built in that 0.76 also includes the debt service, and
Right.
I would argue that anything above 58 is way too high.
I have no basis to opine on that at this point.
Members, other questions? I have just one, and that is, a few sessions ago, you might recall, we passed a very significant piece of legislation, I believe it was SB2, that limits the revenue growth for cities
correct.
and counties to 2.5% to 3.5%.
3.5%, that's right.
Do you see any attempt in city governments or county commissioners using COs or these types of bonds to circumvent or to bypass those revenue caps?
I personally have not seen it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I've not seen people trying to circumvent the caps. We're not going to the voters.
Thank you. Members, other questions for this witness? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
testifying.
Thank you.
Chair calls Maureen Milligan. We show you registered as Maureen Milligan on behalf of Teaching Hospitals of Texas. And you are testifying against the bill, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Please proceed.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Milligan. I'm the president of the Teaching Hospitals of Texas. It's an association representing about 18 hospital districts and other members that together share commitments to do three things. One, provide clinical education for Texas healthcare workforce. 2, provide and plan and respond to disasters, whether they are man-made or natural. And 3, provide the best in life-saving health care while also creating cost-effective access to care for uninsured Texans. So they all support those 3 aims. Today, I'm respectfully testifying in opposition to 1453 and ask that hospital districts continue to be allowed to issue COs and anticipatory notes. As we understand it, this bill strikes that opportunity or that ability. So first, we understand the concern to be overuse and increasing use of COs. However, and I think you have written testimony as well, and so we included the graph that shows this data. However, as 10-year data from the Texas Bond Review Board show, hospital district CO debt is the smallest component of that debt and has remained relatively flat when you look at the other entities. Second, bond election cycles may not allow for the unexpected. That's our concern. Among issuers of COs, hospital districts are unique. They provide life-saving care and are among the first responders in disasters, again, whether those are man-made or natural. The Department of Homeland Security has identified the healthcare sector as one of the country's 16 critical infrastructure sectors that are critical to the ongoing economic and well-being of the country. Our hospital district members are a critical component of that infrastructure. So COs provide an essential tool when hospital districts need to respond to emergencies and maintain that community health infrastructure. Here's an example. After a regular review by the American College of Surgeons at Harris Health Hospital District in Houston, Harris Health was told it needed 7 additional operating rooms that would cost $70 million in order to maintain their level 1 trauma status. Now, Harris Health has very small margins, and so they didn't have that cash on hand to be able to go ahead and implement that. They were, however, able to use these COs and meet that need and keep their level 1 trauma status. Houston has a population of 5 million. Even 2 level 1 trauma centers is not enough. So to go down to 2 would have meant patients diverted and we believe lives lost. That's the case not only in that existing county or in the perimeter of that county, but surrounding counties because patients are transferred for level 1 care and often other kinds of care, burn care, to that entity. So it's really critical that they're able to respond and maintain that critical health infrastructure. Again, not just for the counties where they are, but for those regional counties. So we were concerned that diversion of patients would mean loss of life and loss of access to critical care. As you've heard, COs are also used to build clinics and healthcare capacity to meet localized needs of communities, sometimes for services that might otherwise not be profitable or that don't attract other providers to provide those kinds of services. So our third point, transparency and accountability are inherent in this process. How does that happen? COs must be approved in multiple public meetings. So first, at the hospital district board, and there's an opportunity for public comment, a vote taken there, and then it goes to a separate entity. So it's not just the hospital district saying, you guys think it's a good idea? Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It goes to a second independent external entity for review. Again, with public notice in advance, the opportunity for public input, and then that vote. Third, the thing that we like about this is the example that you've heard actually, is that in El Paso, they went out for a CO for the clinics to support the care in their community. And the existing requirements work. 5% of the community did say, hey, hold on, go to a GO bond, and El Paso did that. So we actually think this works. We think that's an example of the system working. If the community makes that decision, yes. If the community makes a decision, not so sure about this, they can take action and stop that process. But there are conditions under which we feel like the emergency nature of healthcare is really critical to make sure they have that flexibility in terms of a tool, without which we're concerned we're going to have unexpected consequences that will hurt people, their health and so forth. So anyway, I'll stop there and appreciate your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, are there questions for this witness? Representative Hayes.
Thank you for coming. Probably the philosophical divide here might be the number one feedback we get is our property taxes are too high. And we're searching for ways to allow the public to have greater input into that process. So while the points you made were excellent, couldn't we do the same, though, by putting it to the vote of the voters as compared to just the board of directors or the city council or the commissioners, whoever, the school board, making those decisions independently?
Yeah, I appreciate your point and understand the requirements on you to balance all these competing things. The point I would make is that example from Harris Health, the length, and I know Michael Nunez from El Paso will be here, and so he'll be more technical, but my understanding is what the COs allow is a quicker response, a more flexible response. So, for example, another hurricane comes into Houston like Harvey, and boosh, they're down, and they need to respond to that situation quickly. Or the wildfires out in the Panhandle, or the floods out in East Texas. So this provides a tool that can be kind of vetoed by the public, but without it, our concern is there's not a tool. And there's not a way to quickly respond. So that would be my response to you.
In regards to the current 5% that you mentioned in your handout that you thought, that worked, for the Harris Health, I guess, hospital district that you're referencing, can you give me a sense for how many citizens are covered by that particular hospital district?
It's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I know there's about a 5 million, but I don't know what the registered voters are in that. But I'd be happy to come back to you, and I'm sorry I don't have that number for you now.
I was just trying to weigh the difference between the 5% requirement versus the 2%, because on a very large city or community, 2% of 5 million is a big number. Even half of those are registered, so a pretty significant number.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm hoping that Michael, the CFO from El Paso, can at least give you that data from. I'm sorry to throw you under there, Michael, but can at least give you that data from UMC El Paso.
Michael under the bus.
He's scrambling now, but.
Thank you.
So I apologize. That's my bad for not having that number for you.
Members of the questions?
Yes.
Representative Bryant?
Is there some part of hospital financing that for which there is no need for flexibility? I'm sympathetic to what you're talking
right.
about the need for flexibility in urgent times, but what about the other parts of the hospital industry?
I'll give you my sense of that, which is that there are some projects, big projects, that you plan for in advance, you bring to your community. The whole community signs on board to that. And let's say you have a hospital infrastructure that's 1950s, 1960s, and really doesn't meet the needs of the community. Put out for a GO bond and explain what's going on, why you need that updated infrastructure to be able to provide the high quality care that you do. So in my mind, that's not, creating an update to an entire hospital. I could see somebody arguing against that, saying that's not an emergency response. It's not kind of a clinic that we have certain kinds of care that we want to put in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Members of the questions? I just have one or two. You mentioned that there are different levels that start out with a public hearing and go down to a board of directors. How many people would normally show up at a public hearing?
Another good question, and I would say that's probably going to vary by hospital district. And I'm sorry to use this phone a friend again, but I'm going to ask Michael with his experience in El Paso. But I'm happy to follow up with our hospital districts and ask them those questions. So you're interested in about how many people would show up typically for this kind of agenda item at our hospital district board meetings? Okay.
Thank you very much. Members, other questions? Yes, Representative Hope.
Yeah, I just want to follow up because that was kind of where I was thinking too as well. Having served on a school board, you don't get many people showing up to school board meetings, to commissioners' court even. So I can imagine that the number of people that would show up to a board of directors meeting would probably be very small, correct?
Again, I'm going to I don't have that data for you, and so I've got somebody who actually would be there and has gone through that process that I let him
I'm sorry,
answer
I
that.
thought you were the president of...
I'm of the teaching hospitals, but I actually I can't respond to at the hospital district level how many people come to their board meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, then maybe you can answer this one then. So that's the first step's the board of directors meeting, then the commissioner court or city council, depending on situation. And then it goes to petition. And who directs that petition? Is that something you can answer?
I think whoever wants to, like you heard from the previous person testifying, that they had a concern, and so they got together for.
So the different organizations
Yeah.
that are opposed to whatever they're wanting to do would then
Be able
start
to go
working to
ahead
get
and
the-
begin a campaign about why they don't think this is a good idea, and then go ahead and get those signatures.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Members, other questions? If not, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you.
Now we move to Mr. Nunez. Michael Nunez, we show you registered as Michael Nunez on behalf of El Paso County Hospital District, and you're testifying against the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Maury.
Please identify yourself and again.
Yes, Michael Nunez, District Chief Financial Officer for the El Paso County Hospital District. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Lambert, Vice Chair Please, and honorable members of this committee. My name is Michael Nunez. I serve as the District Chief Financial Officer for the El Paso County Hospital District, doing business as University Medical Center of El Paso. I've been there since 2006. I'm here to respectfully testify in opposition to House Bill 1543, which both filed, and committee subversions would prohibit hospital districts from utilizing certificates of obligations. I'd like to begin by thanking Representative Tepper and his staff for meeting with us a couple of weeks ago, for allowing us to share our concerns on this bill. UMC El Paso is the only level 1 trauma center at a 280-mile radius. When it comes to far west Texas, there are clear geographical access challenges, and it is even more important to have local financing flexibility through COs to ensure we can continue to provide the highest level of care for our community. Unlike private, nonprofit, and for-profit hospitals who have access to quick liquidity, COs offer tools for public hospitals can use if needed to address healthcare issues. Hospital districts compared to other governmental entities use COs less frequently and have less COs debt. This has helped our facilities to adequately train residents, fellows as teaching hospitals, and address pandemics, mass shootings like the one our community experienced August 3rd a couple of years ago, and the one this past weekend in Las Cruces, New Mexico, or other disasters at a moment's notice. UMC El Paso has used COs twice, $120 million in 2005 and $150 million in 2013. These two COs help fund 2 neighborhood outpatient clinics in underserved areas, hospital campus renovations, including private room expansions, a surgical center, 2 satellite emergency departments. We believe the current certificates of obligation statute is fully transparent and offers taxpayer safeguards. Aside from having to be publicly posted, approved by our Board of Managers, the Commissioners Court, there was an opportunity for the public to stop the use of a CO back in 2022. We experienced this firsthand when we were trying to create the first burn unit and comprehensive cancer center in El Paso. We held over 70 community meetings. However, there was a petition. It succeeded, surpassing the current 5%, which is about 25,000 registered voters in El Paso. The signatures obtained were about 32,000. Was it to stop the CO? With that said, we did place these projects in November 2024 with a general obligation vote. Thankfully, the El Paso voters approved this proposition with a 65% approval rate. It's important to note as a public hospital, UMC El Paso has different financial makeup compared to private, nonprofit, and nonprofit hospitals. For 2024, we provided over $240 million in estimated compensated care costs, of which our property taxes only reimburse about half of that amount. Further, we feel we continue to be good stewards to the taxpayer. In 3 of the last 4 years, we have implemented the no new revenue tax rate, decreasing the tax rate, and the UMC El Paso is about 8% of the El Paso tax dollar. We continue to experience continual growth, and by further reducing our local financing mechanisms, eliminating the use of COs will hamper our ability to accommodate the the growing needs. For this reason, UMC El Paso respectfully opposes, in its current form, House Bill 1453. Thank you for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, members. Are there questions? Representative Schoolcraft.
Mr. Nunez, did I understand you to say that last year y'all passed a general obligation bond?
Yes, in November 2024, the certificate of obligation request that we had presented in 2022, which was stopped, we did take that to the general public in November 2024, and that passed by 65% vote.
Okay. Fine, thank you.
Other questions? So, can general obligation bonds pay off previous COs?
If the instance that we had a certificate of obligation, but what we did a refunding of our 2013 certificate of obligation. We just refunded those probably about a year ago. So through a refunding that can defease the existing CO, but then there's a new one in place.
So in other words, interest rate markets change, and as a result, interest rates have lowered, and so there might be a refunding or a refinancing of that previous debt obligation.
Yes, sir.
And that occurs fairly often in terms of hospital district financing.
Usually, most of these have about a 10-year limitation. So when you issue the original bond issue or CO, you have to wait till about 10 years before you can take a refunding or opportunity.
I know as a former school board member, that was something that we always were cognizant of, particularly in a changing market and interest rate environment. There's always better opportunity sometimes to refinance existing debt and lower that interest rate, which obviously
Yes, and
lowers
we
your
did that
total
twice
cost.
last year. We had some general obligation bonds from a previous bond issue that we refinanced, and then 3 months later, we refinanced our 2013 certificate of obligation to take advantage of lower interest rates.
Members, before we throw this testimony under the bus again, are there any questions? Further questions? Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chair calls up Charles Reed. Mr. Reed, we show you registered as Charles Reed on behalf of the Dallas County Commissioners Court, and you are here to testify against the bill. Is that correct?
I would actually like to change our position to on the bill.
Okay. Let
Thank
us
you.
make that change on our records. So let me just restate this again. You are Charles Reed. You're registered as Charles Reed on behalf of Dallas County Commissioners Court, and you're testifying on the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Representative for making the changes that he made in committee substitute. It's very clear he heard the concerns from local governments. We really appreciate that. I do want to say the reason we're changing on is because the definition of public works is a lot better. I do want to ask, we continue working with the office to further refine that definition. Specifically, we're not sure why roads, bridges, sidewalks were taken out. If we have a project with TxDOT that's ready to go in January, let's say, we have to wait until either May or November to fund it, and it's just an unnecessary delay for us. We, Dallas County specifically, are particularly sensitive to this as we're almost debt-free. We have so little debt that the bond markets actually consider us debt-free. In the 90s, we started issuing COs, doing refunding bonds to get our debt down to a point now where it's less than 3% of our overall tax rate. Excuse me. We'd also like to see, if possible, some clarification on multi-use facilities. Really appreciate police stations, fire stations going back in as an eligibility item, but the language striking administrative facilities for the governing body. We may have a situation where we build a police station that also houses the administrative functions of that police station, and we want to be able to co-locate them where possible. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Members, questions for this witness? Representative Schoolcraft.
Mr. Reed, I'm just a little perplexed. It seems like my understanding around here was that COs were intended to be used for urgent situations where there just simply wasn't time for voter approval. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is one way to use them, yes. But COs can also be used for short-term, small-dollar projects. So, issue a CO with a 5-year term just to cash flow small renovations that you need to do.
Okay, so would it be okay if we limited these to 5-year terms? C of Os?
For Dallas County, probably be okay, but I
There's probably
don't
some
wanna-
disagreement on
wanna-
that,
don't-
but-
Wouldn't want to put that on the record for anybody
I'm
else.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out why we even have two different kinds of bonds. It sounds like COs are being used just like a general obligation bond, just not getting voter approval. Is that the only difference?
Well, general obligation bonds are typically very large, and it's why you take them to the voters. I mean, we're for Dallas County, and I can only speak on behalf of Dallas County. We're talking about, issuing debt at a level that we would still be considered debt free. Debt that we could pay off if we really wanted to in a single fiscal year, but we're just using it to cash flow projects that we're working on. So that we don't see spikes in our tax rate as a result of it. General obligation bonds are usually way, way out, 30 years, apparently 40 years. I was unaware of that, with multiple projects associated with it, multiple pieces of projects associated with it, rather than just using them specifically to cash flow small time.
But it does look, at least from up here, that maybe not Dallas County, but in some parts of the states, it looks like COs are just being used just like general obligations. All right.
Understood.
You don't have to answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Members, other questions? Representative Bryant?
Mr. Reed, are you, the county owns Parkland Hospital. You didn't
Yes.
comment on the hospitals here. Are we going to have other testimony from Parkland?
I don't know if Parkland will be testifying, but I know that they are a member of teaching hospitals who did testify before I got up here.
Okay. I'm not asking you to do our job for us, but it sounds like to try to accomplish the purposes of the bill, but not keep counties from saving money on interest rates where they can, or can you envision a dollar limit or some kind of a measurement of ability to pay it off quickly, or?
I think that would be a good point to further clarify this bill. Now, I wouldn't want to put other jurisdictions in a bind because you have jurisdictions that have different financial models for how they manage. So Dallas County is a pay-as-you-go county, wildly different than what I've heard this morning for other counties or other hospital districts. But it's not a bad thing to have a robust debt portfolio just from a management of a local government. But for Dallas County's purposes, I mean, putting a limit wouldn't necessarily hurt us, but I wouldn't want to comment on that for the rest of the state. Yeah.
Members, other questions?
Here's one.
Yes, Representative Bumgarner.
So as someone asked earlier, and you're being from Dallas County, thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing that the way that you write your COs, does that help out a little bit with some of the shortfalls that you see from SB2 from 2019?
No, it has nothing to do with
Okay.
Senate Bill 2. Absolutely not. In fact, our debt rate has gone down every year, even since Senate Bill
Sure.
2. Yeah.
Thank you.
Members, other questions? If there are no other questions for this witness, thank you very much for being here. Chair calls James Quintero.